So could you recount for us the importance of the Blackburn affair and the Underground Railroad,
No
the
doubt.
role that Detroit played?
I think earlier we had a sculpture, let me see if I can go back to it, that Ed Dwight, who's a fantastic sculptor, and he did the sculpture down at the waterfront, where you have these, a group of black people who are looking across the Detroit River, you know, to Canada. I think it's the next one here. This here in particular. Many people have come to Detroit, and sometimes I guess they scratch their heads, well, what is that all about? This symbolizes, you know, the terminus of the Underground Railroad. When you have people like William Lambert, George D. Baptiste, William Webb, Madison Lightfoot, I mean, you can go on and on in terms of these pioneering abolitionists. They were joined at some extent by the white abolitionists, many of them being Quakers, because William Lambert had been schooled and educated and lived among the Quakers when he left Trenton, New Jersey, and arrived in Detroit. He, for me, is just a phenomenal individual because he was like one of the main conductors of the Underground Railroad. I know in my classes in New York City, when I talk about the Underground Railroad, the first thing hit their mind is the A train, you know, the D train, and say, no. You know, the Colston Whitehead has done his thing in terms of the metaphorical treatment, you know, of the Underground Railroad. But this was a process, the byway, in which, you know, these here fugitive slaves, you know, could get away from bondage, get away from the so-called peculiar institution and end up in Detroit. So this here, Ed Dwight's sculpture, it symbolizes the people, and certainly after 1850, when you had the fugitive slave law, when that act was passed, that meant that although, and we have the Blackburn case, the Blackburn affair, of these runaway fugitives who arrived from Louisville, Kentucky, and thought they had found a safe refuge away from these bounty hunters. But with the passing of the 1850 Slave Act, that meant you had to go a little bit further. So these people are looking across, you know, the Detroit River to Windsor. And sometimes even Windsor wasn't far enough. You had to keep going, Amherstburg, on up 401, onto Chatham, Ontario, onto Toronto. And of course, Chatham later on would become a very profound, what you call community of abolitionists that was up there. We can talk about Osborne Anderson, who was one of the black men who rode with John Brown. And when you start talking about the later period, after the whole abolitionist beginning with William Lambert, here's Frederick Douglass comes to Detroit, and he meets with John Brown. There's a marker of it downtown. You know, Second Baptist Church was very instrumental in that. And of course, St. Matthew's was going to be instrumental later on. We cannot ignore the church, you know, in this whole coming together in terms of resistance, you know, the whole idea of self-determination. It was coming from a number of church leaders who were affiliated with the abolitionist movement, but no one more pronounced and profound than William Lambert. His story, I mean, that would make just a fascinating film to see the kind of stuff he went through, the mystery system that he put together. They had a coding, kind of a secret code, secret language. You know, they had trained all these individuals on the Underground Railroad in case you encountered some of those bounty hunters out there. I mean, it's so instructive. And later on, his involvement with St. Matthew's Church, and his involvement in the educational process, working with people like Fannie Richards, who was a pioneering black woman in terms of the first African-American to teach in the so-called public school system here. So we have this conjunction, you know, and it's gonna be a collaborative situation from one generation to another, each spurred on by the other, each, you know, taking its kind of influence and its enthusiasm for the breakthroughs occurring in the previous generation. We're going to see that happening time and time again in this whole odyssey of Black Detroit.